Hey Zen fam, hey Scottish Mancave. So, Scottish Mancave today did a video, he did a little live dealy, and he raised some interesting questions about CEX. Now, for those of you from across the pond and other locations around the world, CEX is a second-hand trade-in store chain kind of dealing. Basically, if you've got like movies or video games or PC bits or phones or other forms of electronic goodness like VR helmets and such, retro systems, modern systems, you can take them in and you can trade them for cash or for store credit. And a bit like with GameStop or EB Games or Game or wherever it is in your particular part of the world, then you could obviously have the thing where you get either store credit or you get cash in hand. Obviously you get more store credit than you do cash in hand because they want to make sure that you stay inside their own particular retail ecosystem. Anyway, Scottish Mancave was talking about how whenever you buy something from them online and they ship it to you, that their pricing model for their postage seems to be horribly out of whack, especially when you consider that some of the cheaper games cost very, very little, but the pricing seems to be hugely off kilter. Now, yes, it costs the same amount of money to postage a game that is a 50p game to a game that's like a 30 quid, 50 quid game because they weigh exactly the same. That's not an argument, and I don't think Scottish Mancave would argue such a point. He's a very practical fellow. However, what he was talking about was the fact that their distribution network for how they hold and store the games seems to counteract their ability to actually charge very little for games till the point that postage gets involved. And he advocated for a central storage unit where games could actually be left from. Now, this kind of works and also kind of doesn't work because of the kind of model that CEX is. You see, CEX, although it is a chain operation, it's unlike other chain operations because all its stock comes from the public. Other concerns such as Argos or Game or any kind of retail based entity, their stock all comes from suppliers. The suppliers send stock to the company will have a warehouse. The warehouse will stock the stuff and ship it out from the warehouse as and when it's needed to wherever it has to go. So there's a central location and stuff goes out. However, with CEX, the stuff that happens in the store comes from the people who are close to that store. So here in Edinburgh, I can go to one of our CEXs, we have a number. I think it's about 3 of them, I could be wrong on that. But if say I go to the CEX on Rose Street in Edinburgh, which is 2 streets behind the big shopping street in Edinburgh, Princess Street. I could go into that CEX and I could trade in some games. And then maybe some time after, somebody will go into the store and go, I fancy that game. I wonder if I'll find it in CEX, and maybe the game I traded will be there, and they'll go, woohoo, I have my game, happy happy dance. Now, if someone is looking for that particular game, and say it's a bit rare, and they're in another location like say Birmingham, the store in Birmingham will go, we don't have that game. However, if you go on the website, you can order that game, and that game will go from the Edinburgh store to a central location. From the central location, to your house. And that, unfortunately, is where the pricing comes in, because the game is effectively being moved twice. So, because the game is being moved twice, it has to be paid for twice. This is where the extra expenditure is being incurred by users like Scottish Mancave. So, the idea of having a central warehouse is good in principle. However, it would be much more fiddly to work out. I mean, yes, you could have a base of games, but then you would still be transporting a bunch of games from a bunch of stores to a place where they could sit for way more than just an average extended amount of time. So if these games are sitting there and sitting there and sitting there and never leaving, then that's taking up space. I mean, and if you have when you have a warehouse, you have insurance for the warehouse, you have employees for the warehouse, you have equipment for the warehouse, insurance and pay and fire regulations and electricity bills, and fairly soon it starts to mount up and mount up and mount up. And the bigger and more complex a warehouse is, the more things that warehouse is going to need, like toilets and canteens and cleaning staff, and all of which adds to the layout that the company puts out. So if you had CEX with a central warehouse where all their doubles would go, or let's be generous, let's say half of their doubles would go, so then more people could access the games from more locations around the UK. That would be all lovely jubbly, except for the point that these games are then stored in such a place that in itself has to be paid for, which would have a knock-on effect, because one, the postage would still be expensive, and two, the amount of money that they would charge for the games in the stores would probably rise, and or that the amount of money that you get back for your games would probably fall to pay for the warehouse. So in essence, it's basically damned if you do, damned if you don't. So CEX could have a warehouse, bro, but if they did, they'd have to offset the outlay for a warehouse via other means, which would mean that your games would end up being more expensive. So as far as Zenbloke sees it, I can't imagine a way where CEX could have a warehouse that would meet your needs and give you the games cheaper through the post without it being more expensive in the other areas to pay for it, thus netting out probably about the same. If anything, it might end up being more expensive. And because it's a central location, that means that yeah, there would just be more complication. They'd have to pay for a computer system to store it all. There'd have to be staff to sort it and to deliver it. They would probably no longer be relying on Royal Mail. They'd probably actually have to have their own sort of dedicated delivery system. Right now I think that like CEX use either Royal Mail or DPD. I'm not sure which, because I've never ordered from CEX. No, tell a lie, I did once, but that was like about 5 years ago, so I can't remember who it was that they were sent through, and it would have changed probably anyway, because as with all corporate entities, they're always searching for the lowest common bidder. Hopefully that solves any quandary you may have as Scottish Mancave. And thank you for raising these points. You did give up an interesting discussion point. Hashtag support Scottish YouTubers, and of course, as always, nae bother.